3 years since I've done an episode on ghost stories, so I figured it's time for another one. This time, I'm going to tell not only a popular tale from Northern Ohio, but I'm also going to share my own stories about encounters with ghosts. From the South Shore of Lake Erie, this is Great Lakes True Crime. Reminder to check out our webpage at podpage.com/Great Lakes True Crime. There you'll find information on the show, including links, contact information, our online merchandise store, just in time for the holidays, and a donate button to help support the show. That's podpage.com/Great Lakes True Crime. Speaking of donations, thank you to our loyal listener, Teresa, who recently gave a generous donation to help support the show. Thanks, Teresa. Now let's get into our first ghost story. Punderson Manor is a 29-room, 14-bath, Tudor-style mansion located within the boundaries of Punderson State Park near Burton, Ohio. Burton is a small hamlet about a 30-minute drive east of Cleveland and not far from the heart of Ohio's Amish country. For those of you who may not know, a large part of Northeast Ohio is known as the Western Reserve. If you've ever heard of Case Western Reserve University, that's where the name came from. So what exactly is the Western Reserve? An area of land in Ohio that was owned by the state of Connecticut in the years following the American Revolution. Connecticut was one of several states that had land claims from colonial times in what was known as the Ohio Country back then. Connecticut eventually gave up most of its claims to the federal government so that the Northwest Territory could be created, but it did hang on to the northeast corner of the Ohio Country. This is the area that came to be known as the Connecticut Western Reserve. The eastern portion of the reserve was sold to the Connecticut Land Company, which in 1796 sent a surveyor named Moses Cleveland to survey the territory and lay out townships. Moses Cleveland, and it was spelled Cleaveland, the first A at some point in time was dropped, probably by a map maker. Cleveland created townships of 25 square miles. In the early years of settlement, lots of New Englanders bought land in the Western Reserve and moved there to start a new life. About 10 years after Moses Cleveland and his team of surveyors laid out the townships and the city of Cleveland, so about 1806, a man named Lemuel Punderson moved to the area from Connecticut and built a mill and distillery on a glacial lake known at the time as the Big Pond. A very creative name, I might add. Punderson died suddenly in 1822, and his family held on to the property and worked the land for quite a while afterwards. The Big Pond was eventually renamed Punderson Lake to honor the early settler. And 80 years after Punderson's death, in 1902, a man named William Cleveland bought the property surrounding the Punderson Lake. It's been said that William Cleveland was a descendant of Moses Cleveland, but that claim doesn't seem to have been substantiated, so I'm not really sure. In either case, he built a large house and kennel on the property and raised animals there. We're talking not only dogs, but also wolves, goats, bison, and all sorts of other critters. William Cleveland ran his business for about 20 years and then sold the property. It changed hands several times over the years after that. The land around Punderson Lake was sold to Carl Long, a native Ohioan who then lived in Detroit and owned a trucking company. He demolished the home on the property, much to the chagrin of William Cleveland's family, and started construction on a grand Tudor-style mansion at the site. He never finished building the grand house, though. Local legend has always held that Carl Long lost his fortune during the Great Depression and then took his own life by hanging himself in the attic of the partially finished home. Stemming from that legend is ghost story number 1. The only problem with that legend, like so many urban legends that were spread in the pre-internet era, it isn't true. Carl didn't lose his money and he did not take his own life. He died of natural causes at his home in Detroit in 1932 at the age of 46. We don't know why he never finished construction of the house. The property was ultimately sold to the state of Ohio in 1948 to be used as a state park. Construction of the Tudor mansion was finally finished by the state, and Punderson State Park officially opened to the public in 1951. In later years, the mansion, now known formally as Punderson Manor, was expanded and is used as a state park lodge today with a number of guest rooms. Not long after the manor opened, the ghost stories started. The fable of Carl Long hanging himself never went away, despite the truth. It's said that his ghost haunts the house to this day. Another legend has it that a summer resort known as the Wales Hotel, which stood not far from where the house now is, burned down in 1885, and in that fire quite a few children perished. Those children, it is said, now haunt the mansion known as Punderson Manor. The Wales Hotel was a real place, but it wasn't opened until 1889, 4 years after the alleged fire. And on top of that, there was no fire. The hotel was demolished by William Cleveland in 1925. As mentioned earlier, Punderson Lake is a glacial lake, meaning that although it's not a huge lake surface area-wise, it's a natural lake and it's very deep. Unfortunately, quite a few drownings have happened at the lake over the years. The ghosts of some of the drowning victims are said to haunt Punderson Manor. One of the specific stories revolves around Julius Neubauer of Warrensville, Ohio, which today is a suburb southeast of Cleveland. Julius and a friend, Archibald Gates, ventured to Punderson Lake to spend the afternoon in 1904. They rented a boat, rowed out to the middle of the lake, and decided to go for a swim. The boat wasn't anchored and began to drift away after the pair jumped into the water. While Archibald swam to shore safely, Julius swam toward the boat but couldn't quite make it before exhaustion set in. He went underwater only about 10 feet from the boat and never resurfaced. And I mean he never resurfaced. Although recovery efforts were undertaken in subsequent days, his body was never found. It's believed to still be in the lake, potentially lodged in quicksand in the bottom of the lake, and the ghost of Julius Neubauer is said to haunt Punderson Manor. More recently, a woman staying at the lodge on a business trip said that a trash can in the bathroom inexplicably moved while she was in the shower. It was blocking the shower door, and she couldn't get out of the shower without first moving the wastebasket. She left for her meetings after carefully returning it to its place near the sink, but when she returned to her room that night, you guessed it, the trash can was back in front of the shower door. It's also been reported that guests frequently call down to the front desk to report loud noises in rooms next to theirs, and in some of those cases, the rooms turned out to be empty. In another story, one man called the front desk to complain about the party going on above him. The only problem was, the man was staying on the top floor. So is Punderson Manor really haunted? I've personally been there many times and have not noticed any ghosts myself, but maybe I just got lucky, or unlucky, depending on your stance on ghosts, I guess. Speaking of haunted hotels and taverns, why is this used as a selling point? One city I've visited quite a few times in my life, and I really love it, one of my favorite cities in the world, is Savannah, Georgia. Savannah is one of those cities that's got tons of historic structures. It's a great tourist town, great walking town, and it also has a lot of ghost tours. Some of these inns and restaurants and things like that will say things like Savannah's most haunted hotel. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm going to go ahead and stay away from that if you're telling me there's ghosts in it. I don't know. I'd rather not have ghosts keeping me company on my vacation. So anyways, for my own ghost stories, people sometimes ask if I believe in ghosts, and I say no, I don't believe in them because I know they exist. I've had 2 encounters with ghosts in my life, actually more, but 2 occasions of encounters with ghosts, neither of which are terribly interesting stories. First, I was at a party at a house in suburban Cleveland. I was about 18 years old. It was a dark, foggy night, and this party, it was a house party in a suburban subdivision, newer houses. I decided to go outside to get some air. It was getting pretty stuffy and hot in the party. So I'm standing outside in the front driveway, and again, it's kind of cloudy, very dark, and I see this kid like running through the neighborhood, but very fast. It didn't quite seem like the normal running speed or motion. So I yelled out, I said, hey, there's a party going on over here. Why don't you come on? I see this thing run back and forth a couple more times and then just sort of disappear into thin air. So I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty weird. And then I start thinking, maybe there was a ghost. So I go back inside into the house, and the guy that's having the party, I didn't really know. I had never met him before that night, actually. So I said, hey, if any kids like died in your neighborhood or anything, and he got this jaw-dropping deer in the headlights look on his face, and he's like, why are you asking? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I just thought maybe I heard something. And he was like, yeah, like 10 years ago, a guy down the street killed his whole family and then turned the gun on himself, killed himself. And I was just like, wow, that's first of all, terribly tragic, but I think I just saw the ghost of one of the kids running through the neighborhood. The next one was probably a few years later. I was in college in Bowling Green, Ohio, and living in an apartment, nothing historic or very old. It was probably built in the 60s or 70s, maybe even 80s. I'm not sure. It was sort of a nondescript, not very great apartment complex. Just a little parking lot type community. And living there at night, every once in a while, I'd see these sort of white lights kind of flashing through the apartment. They would only come for a brief second or two. I saw it the first time, and I was like, I don't know what that was. Maybe headlights from a car outside or something. But I started doing the math, and that wasn't possible, where I was seeing these lights. So I saw it a few more times, and I'm like, well, that's a ghost, I think. So I'm kind of like, well, not hurting me, not really doing anything, not a real big deal, but I would see it every once in a while. So fast forward to about, 2 or 3 months after I moved out of that apartment, my roommate and I, who's one of my good friends, moved into a new place. And one day I said, hey, did you ever see a ghost in our old apartment? And he was like, yeah, all the time. You? And I was like, yep, all the time. So that was my second ghost story. Like I said, nothing too extravagant, but there it is. Oh, speaking of ghosts, why is it that whenever they're on movies, TV shows, wherever, it's always like some 1800s like guy or woman in like these night clothes, long night shirts, with a sconce? Like, didn't people die like in the 1900s or 1400s, whatever? Why are they all 1800s? I want to see a guy like with an 80s Walkman walking around in one of these ghost movies sometime. Anyway, that's it for this episode of Great Lakes True Crime. Hope you've enjoyed it in my ghost stories. If you like the show, please tell a friend and leave us a 5-star review if you can. Again, that really helps us out. You can follow the show on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Great Lakes True Crime. And a reminder, we don't do Patreon here, so thank you to the show supporters who bought me a virtual cup of coffee through our website at podpage.com/Great Lakes True Crime. This has been Steve, your host and producer. Thanks for listening, guys.